Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there was a king named Kofi. He loved his 3 daughters more than anything in the world. Their names were Aria, Zuri, and Kala, and they were smart, kind, and brave. The king's love for them was so strong that he never wanted them to leave him, not even to get married. As Aria, Zuri, and Kala grew older, many princes from other lands came to the palace. They wanted to marry the king's beautiful daughters. One day, a prince named Rayan came to ask for Aria's hand in marriage. He was kind, strong, and really liked Aria. He promised to take good care of her and make her happy. But King Kofi did not want Aria to marry anyone. He wanted her, and her sisters, to stay with him forever. Even though the prince seemed like a good man, the king's heart filled with worry. He thought, what if Rayan takes Aria far away and I never see her again? So, the king told Rayan to leave, saying, I will not give Aria to you. Aria was very sad. She didn't understand why her father didn't want her to live her own life. She loved him, but she also wanted to see the world and have her own family one day. Zuri and Kala felt the same. They loved their father, but they also dreamed of having their own adventures. They didn't want to be trapped inside the palace forever. The king's heart was in the right place, but his love made him hold on too tight. He thought he was keeping his daughters safe, but instead, he was making them feel like prisoners. One day, the 3 sisters made a secret plan. They whispered to each other, we need to find a way to show father that we are ready to make our own choices. They didn't want to hurt their father's feelings, but they also knew they couldn't stay in the palace forever. As they talked about how to leave the palace, a man named Idris, who was the king's most trusted soldier, overheard them. Idris was brave and loyal, but he also knew the king was wrong to keep his daughters from the world. Idris quietly approached Aria and said, I know you want to leave. I can help you and your sisters, but you must trust me. Aria wasn't sure if she could trust Idris, but she knew they couldn't escape without help. Meanwhile, King Kofi started to notice that something was wrong. His daughters seemed distant, and he could tell they were keeping secrets from him. He felt more and more afraid that someone was trying to take them away. The king became so worried that he told his daughters, you must never leave the palace without my permission. His face was serious, and his voice was filled with fear. Aria, Zuri, and Kala looked at each other. They didn't want to disobey their father, but they knew they couldn't live like this anymore. One night, the palace was very quiet. The moon was full, and the stars twinkled in the sky. Aria, Zuri, and Kala, with the help of Idris, began to sneak out of the. They were careful, moving through the dark halls, avoiding the guards, and holding their breath whenever they heard a sound. But just as they were about to leave, King Kofi, who had been watching closely, appeared. His eyes were filled with tears, and his voice was shaking. Why are you leaving me? He asked. I love you. I only want to protect you. The daughters stopped in their tracks. They loved their father deeply, but they also knew that they couldn't stay forever. Aria stepped forward and said softly, Father, we love you too, but we need to live our own lives. You must trust us, just as we trust you. King Kofi stood there, torn between his love for his daughters and his fear of losing them. He didn't know what to do. Should he let them go and trust they would be safe? Or should he stop them to keep them close? He didn't want them to leave because he was afraid they might get hurt or lost, just like he had lost their mother many years ago. The palace was so quiet that even the wind seemed to stop. Aria, Zuri, and Kala waited for their father to speak. They didn't want to hurt him, but they knew they couldn't stay trapped in the palace forever. After what felt like a very long time, King Kofi finally spoke. His voice was soft, almost like a whisper. I don't know what I would do without you, he said. But I can't keep you here forever if it makes you unhappy. The daughters looked at each other, hope shining in their eyes. Maybe, just maybe, their father would let them go. But they knew it wasn't easy for him. Aria stepped forward again, reaching for her father's hand. We will always love you, father. And we will always come back to you. But we need to see the world, make our own choices, and find our own happiness. Zuri nodded, her gentle voice adding, "We want to help others, just like you've always helped us. But we need to do it in our own way." Carla, the youngest, spoke with her fiery spirit. "We're strong, Father. You've raised us to be brave and wise. We'll be safe. And if anything happens, we'll always return to you." King Kofi's heart was heavy. He loved them so much, but deep down, he knew they were right. They were not little girls anymore. They were strong, smart young women who needed to live their own lives. But still, his heart ached at the thought of letting them go. Just as the king was about to speak again, a loud noise came from outside the palace. The sound of horses galloping and men shouting filled the air. The king's eyes widened with fear. "What's happening?" he asked. Idris, the king's loyal soldier, rushed into the room, his face serious. "My king, we have trouble. There are people outside the palace walls, men from a faraway land. They've come to take your daughters by force." King Kofi's heart pounded in his chest. He knew that many people had tried to win his daughters' hearts before, but now, some were trying to take them by force. His greatest fear had come true. Without thinking, the king rushed to his sword, ready to protect his daughters. "I won't let anyone take you," he shouted, his voice filled with the fierce love he had always felt for them. But Aria, Zuri, and Carla were not afraid. They had been trained well, and they knew how to fight. "Father, we will fight beside you," Aria said, holding her sword steady. Zuri, with her healing knowledge, prepared to help anyone who was hurt. Carla, with her bow and arrows, was ready to defend her family. The palace guards stood with them, but Idris whispered to the king, "We cannot win this battle with strength alone. We need to be smart, too." Outside the palace, the attackers were getting closer. The air was thick with tension. King Kofi, his daughters, and Idris stood at the top of the palace stairs, watching as the enemy approached. The king's heart raced, but he felt proud to see his daughters standing so brave and strong beside him. The first wave of attackers stormed the gates, but Carla's arrows flew fast, stopping many before they could get close. Zuri stayed back, helping the wounded soldiers and making sure everyone stayed strong. Aria, with her sharp sword, fought beside her father. Every strike she made showed how much she had learned from him. The king realized, in the middle of the fight, that his daughters didn't need him to keep them locked away anymore. They were more than ready to face the world. The battle went on for what felt like hours, but the royal family and their loyal soldiers stood their ground. Finally, the attackers started to retreat, realizing they could not defeat the king and his brave daughters. As the last of the attackers disappeared into the distance, King Kofi looked at his daughters with tears in his eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of pride. "You are all so strong," he said, his voice shaking. "I was wrong to think I had to protect you by keeping you locked away." Aria smiled, still catching her breath from the fight. "We will always need your protection, Father. But we are ready to face the world too." Zuri, gentle and caring as always, hugged her father. "We'll never be far away. We will always come back." Carla, full of energy and excitement, grinned. "And now we can have our own adventures, just like you had when you were younger." King Kofi smiled for the first time in a long while. He realized that loving his daughters didn't mean keeping them close forever. It meant trusting them to find their own way. After the battle was over, the palace became quiet again. The air felt lighter, and the stars twinkled in the sky, as if celebrating the bravery of the king and his daughters. But inside the palace, King Kofi still had much to think about. The next morning, the sun rose brightly, and the kingdom looked peaceful once more. The king sat in his throne room, thinking about everything that had happened. His daughters had shown him they were strong and ready for the world, but his heart still felt heavy. He loved them so much, and the thought of them leaving made him sad. Aria, Zuri, and Kala came to him, each wearing hopeful smiles. They knew it was time to talk to their father about the next step in their lives. Aria, the eldest, spoke first. "Father, we know you've always wanted to protect us. But we've proven that we can protect ourselves too. We're ready to explore the world, just like you did when you were young." Zuri, gentle and kind, added, "We'll never be far from your heart. No matter where we go, we will always come back home to you. We just need to follow our dreams, just like you followed yours when you became king." Kala, the youngest, full of excitement, jumped in. "We want to see new places, meet new people, and help others. We'll be safe, Father. You taught us everything we need to know." King Kofi looked at his daughters, their eyes full of hope and love. He could see how much they had grown. His heart swelled with pride, but also with worry. What if something happened to them? What if they never came back? But then he remembered the battle from the night before. He had seen his daughters fight bravely, take care of others, and stand strong together. They were ready, even if it was hard for him to let go. Taking a deep breath, the king finally spoke. "I see now that I cannot keep you here forever. You have shown me that you are brave and wise. You are no longer little girls who need my protection at every step. You are strong women, ready to make your own choices."
Aria, Zuri, and Kala smiled brightly, their hearts filled with happiness. "But," the king continued, "promise me one thing. Wherever you go, whatever you do, never forget your home. Never forget that I will always be here, waiting for you." The daughters nodded eagerly. "We promise, Father," Aria said. "We will always come back to you." The next few days were busy. The daughters began packing their things, preparing for their big journey. Each of them had a different dream they wanted to follow. Aria, the eldest, wanted to travel to distant lands and learn about other kingdoms. She was smart and curious, always wanting to learn more about the world. She planned to meet with other leaders and bring peace between different kingdoms, just as her father had done many years ago. Zuri, the middle sister, wanted to help people. She loved healing and caring for others, and she dreamed of visiting villages to help the sick and the poor. She had always been the kindest of the three, and she wanted to use her gifts to make the world a better place. Kala, the youngest, couldn't wait to explore forests, mountains, and seas. She loved adventure and dreamed of finding hidden treasures, discovering new lands, and learning new skills. Her heart was wild and free, and she was excited to see what surprises the world had in store for her. The day finally came when the three daughters were ready to leave. The palace was filled with excitement, but also a little sadness. The king stood by the palace gates, watching as his daughters prepared to go on their journey. Aria hugged her father tightly. "I'll miss you, Father. But I will write to you every time I visit a new kingdom. I'll tell you all about the people I meet." Zuri, with tears in her eyes, kissed her father on the cheek. "I'll send word about the people I help, and I'll make sure to visit you as often as I can." Kala, full of energy, waved her bow in the air. "Don't worry, Father. I'll find amazing treasures and stories to tell you when I return." King Kofi smiled, though his heart felt a little heavy. "I will miss you every day," he said. "But I know you will do great things. Remember, this will always be your home." With one final hug, the three daughters set off on their new adventures. Aria led the way, with Zuri and Kala following close behind. The king stood at the gates, watching them disappear into the distance, his heart full of love, pride, and just a little sadness. As the king stood alone, watching the horizon, Idris, his loyal general, came to his side. "You have raised them well, my king," Idris said. "They will return stronger and wiser." King Kofi nodded. "I know," he said softly, "but it's hard to let go. They are my heart, and now my heart travels far away." Idris smiled. "But your heart is strong, and it will always find its way back to you." The king looked at the road his daughters had taken, thinking about all the adventures they would have. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: his daughters would make him proud. And one day, they would return to the palace with stories of bravery, kindness, and discovery.